All right, greetings TFA Nation. My name is Chris Kiley. I'm Associate Director of Texans for the Arts. Welcome to our weekly Texas Arts Advocacy Update. I'm going to throw it over to Ann to introduce our guests today.
Great, thank you. Partner for crime for Texans for the Arts. Ann Graham, Executive Director of Texans for the Arts, the statewide arts advocacy organization. Excited to be here. Every Wednesday, we bring different guests for different conversation about the legislative session, topical issues that are happening. And today we have got two special guests I'm excited to announce. Dr. Gary Gibbs, the Executive Director of the Texas Commission on the Arts, which is our state arts agency, and also Wendie Cook, who is the Executive Director of the Citadel Foundation, also a member of the Canadian City Council in Canadian Texas, which is up in the Panhandle. She's also a member of the Board of Directors of Texans for the Arts. Today, we're sort of posing a question. There is a committee called the Culture, Recreation, and Tourism Committee. Many committees in the Texas State Legislature. And this is one of the sort of umbrellas or as overarching above the Texas Commission on the Arts. And I would love to hear from both Dr. Gibbs and Wendie about what the relationship is between the Culture, Recreation, and Tourism Committee is, what their charge is, what is their relationship to the TCA? They just had their first round of public meetings, which they convened as part of the session this last week. And Dr. Gibbs was invited to testify. Subsequently, Wendie Cook was also invited to testify. So I'm really curious, and I figured you might be curious too, just to learn a little bit more about this relationship, how they're partners in our work in the arts and culture and tourism, and no better people to speak about it than Dr. Gibbs and Wendie. So Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. It's good to be here today. The Culture and Recreation Tourism Committee is a committee in the House of Representatives, and they have oversight of several state agencies, including Texas Commission on the Arts, but also Texas Parks and Wildlife, Texas Historical Commission, the State Preservation Board, the Texas Library and Archives Commission. So any agency that has to do with tourism, the Governor's Office of Economic Development and Tourism, the Texas State Music Office, the Texas State Film Office, anything that has to do with culture and tourism and recreation comes under their oversight powers. And when I say oversight, that basically means that once or twice a year, the heads of these different agencies, and this is what I was doing on Monday, we go before them and we testify, giving them kind of a broad overview of how our agency is doing. And then they're able to ask questions. The committee consists of 9 members of the House, and they're all appointed by the Speaker of the House. The chair of the committee this year is new. His name is Ken King, Representative Ken King from Canadian. And he invited us on their first meeting to come and share with all the committee members who may be new to the committee, may not know about our agency, kind of what we do. The other function that the committee has is that any bill that concerns historical preservation or arts or culture or tourism, any of those types of things goes through this committee. Those bills get referred to this committee. They will take testimony on those bills, and then it's up to this committee as to whether to pass it on out to the Calendars Committee, who would then set it up for debate on the House floor. So that's kind of the function that they serve. As far as we're concerned, there's one other role that committee performs for us, and that is the chair of the committee serves as the chair of the State Artist Designation Committee, which consists of appointees from the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House. But the committee is chaired by the chairman of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, and the chair is responsible for introducing that designation on the House floor and then finding a sponsor in the Senate to do it there as well. So I know I talked a lot about government stuff just then, I hope I didn't make it more confusing, but that's basically what they do. They have no ability to give us money. Of course, they can advocate with their other with the other elected members and the members on appropriations, but they have no role in that actually. It's more of vetting the bills that impact their area and also serving as an oversight committee for the cultural agencies in state government.
Thank you. So it does sound still like it would be really healthy from an advocacy perspective to make sure that we know as advocates who's on the committee, who their constituents are, what some of our arts leaders are and tourism leaders are, so that if we get to the point where there are bills that we want to support, we have a personal connection with those legislators. So
yes.
Right. Good advocacy. So we'll make sure that we post and share that information in terms of who's on that committee. Segueing right now to Wendie, you received an invitation from Chairman King. So if you want to just chat about what that opportunity was like, what your charge was. And I'm always curious if they ask questions and what the conversation was like.
Hi, yes, I did. I received a call last week, kind of a last minute invitation, I think, to talk. And he specifically wanted COVID impact on Canadian. So he was the chair, but he asked me to go second. He said in the committee he didn't want to show favoritism. So, but, it was really great to hear the variety of perspectives from the testimony, because each one of those representatives invited someone who has a story to tell about the impact. And so I shared, 3 stories just in our, we're small, rural, northeast corner of the Panhandle. We're the state's smallest cultural district and most rural. And so we have different levels of impact than, say, Fort Worth would have, or the Valley would have, or San Antonio would have. And so it was really interesting to hear. I was the only museum executive that was invited. There were performance people, there were convention people, there were musical theater people. So it was really interesting to hear the varied perspectives on the impact. So, I think it's my understanding that it was kind of a last minute thing that they decided to do in the way that they did it. And so that at the end of the hearing, they were all very thankful that they took the time to do it in the way that they did. And it was just my first opportunity, so I'm not sure exactly, how it varied, but they really found value in that. They did ask questions. They asked questions to every single person who provided testimony, which I thought was great, because they seemed very engaged. They asked pointed questions of impact. They shared their sympathies in some instances of the experiences that we've all had. And so it was really good to have that affirmation that someone was actually listening, and that you felt as if they would be, working to really try to do what they could do. Granted, they're not a funding, they can't send us any money, but even just having somebody else to, run the issues up the flagpole and say, hey, pay attention to these people. That was, I think that's important from an arts perspective. That's what we need right now. So.
I think it's a real honor to be invited. And, I agree. The more we can get our arts leaders to speak in front of legislators, the better. I've never met a legislator who doesn't find value in the arts. There's a belief their family members, they may participate in things. They may question whether the public investment is where, which is what our issue is that we work on. But just to be able to have the opportunity for legislators to hear those stories. And I think the data is really important, and the economic impact numbers are really important. And then to get your stories are equally so. I also wonder if they're not sort of preparing themselves for what we hope is an influx of federal money from the American Relief Fund, or the American ARP, the ARP, So we know that the Senate and the House have passed it, and it will now be on President Biden's desk. And that will be bringing in a lot of money to the states. And Texas will have the opportunity to figure out how they're going to use those resources. And some of those resources, we hope, would be NEA money that would likely come through the TCA. It's very complicated. The American Relief Program and how those funds are going to be distributed is not clear. So it could just be that legislators are already thinking ahead. How can we voice that? And our own legislative agenda and the agenda also of the TCA is to secure COVID relief funding this year. I mean, the arts organizations have just been hit harder than any others. Even the comptroller's office said that from a tourism perspective, the industry, the hospitality and the tourism industry was hit harder than any other industry in the state. 42% decline in hotel tax revenues. So we're hurting, and getting these additional resources are going to be really helpful. So hopefully, go ahead, Wendie.
No, and from a rural perspective, it's important that they realize that it's they're looking at it with the eyes of their constituents, right? So if you're in a bigger city, which everyone was, if you're in a bigger city, the level of impact is realized in different ways, obviously. And so the decisions that they're making as a Houston representative or a Dallas representative come down and affect my rural areas too, and other rural areas. And, I just reminded them about fully funding that particular portion of the TCA's budget for cultural districts gives an opportunity for the rural cultural districts to actually have a lifeline there. And so just reaffirming that, understanding that there's some disparity in the budgets between House and the Senate in that, and they want to fully fund, but the Senate is not. And so just reminding them that there may have to be a level of compromise, but just not letting that come off of their desk, so to speak, and that they're constantly being pounded with, please, 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 let us have those fully funded budgets back. It really is just a lifeline. So just reminding them in storied ways, I think was helpful, I hope.
Yeah, well, we always talk about when a legislator walks out of a meeting and he's recounting your story, then you've really made a difference. And they're besieged with numbers of all sorts, and numbers matter, and that data does matter, especially when the comptroller releases it, because they speak the same language when they're speaking with the comptroller. So, but it is really important to, and again, the opportunity to testify, I think, is just one more opportunity for them to hear, rural, urban, and wherever their constituents are. So, well, it's 4:14. That was great. I mean, it's wonderful to learn about these different structures that exist and where your voice is and where the power decisions are made. And as Gary said, it highlights the individual representatives that are yours or that you report to. You are a constituent, and you can still, even though they may not give money, they can talk to their peers who are on the committees that do appropriate money. So there's important connections there. Any final words of wisdom or thought, either from Gary or from Wendie?
I would just let those that have tuned in know that things are going to start moving very quickly now, because Friday is the deadline to file bills, and the 60-day period where you can't really do much will have passed. And so things will really kick into high gear. We already know that the subcommittee in the House Appropriation over our agency will be meeting Monday to make their decisions regarding our budget. And I saw documents for the same thing on the Senate side. Don't know when that subcommittee will be meeting, but things are gonna be fast and furious from here on out.
Right. So hold on for the ride, keep listening, keep checking in, because then there's a good chance you'll hear from us too if we need your help in reaching your legislators who are in really pivotal positions in the financial decision-making process, and Senate Finance Committee subcommittee over Article 1 and the House Appropriations subcommittee over Articles 1, 4, and 5. So thank you both for your leadership, and Gary for your leadership across the state, and Wendie for yours in Canadian and way beyond in the Panhandle and further. So we really appreciate your support and your joining us today, and thank you very much. We'll see everybody else next Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Thank you all. Thanks.